In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be reviewing Inter's season together with Serie A commentator Kendrick. We'll be discussing the flop of the season, the MVP of the season, best goal, best performance, this week's Moggi, Moratti and Frog, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, on SempreInter.com.
Siamo noi campioni d'Italia, l'Inter è campione d'Italia, l'Inter è campione d'Italia.
Benvenuti, bentornati to the final episode of Studio Inter for the season. It's our season finale. It has been one of the longest seasons, it feels like, given what happened last summer and with the pandemic. It feels like we've been going on. Well, we have pretty much. I mean, we had a 2-3 week break and then we started again. So we've basically been going nonstop since June. But now we've come to the end of this marathon season, the COVID season, Scudetto, which some people claim that Inter have won instead of a Scudetto, but they are mainly black and white and bitter. And that's how we like them. But before we get into everything, let me begin by introducing my panelists, starting with the SempreInter.com preview writer, Mr. Mohamed Nassar. Mystic Mo, we have to give props to you because you really did say you've got predictions have been so close to either being spot on or have been spot on. So take a bow.
Thank you very much. Yeah, ever since I got raped by that radioactive dolphin, my predictive powers have been off the charts. No, but I kid. No, it's honestly, it's I guess I'm an occasionally correct, foreseer of inaccurate futures.
And we're also joined by SempreInter.com's chief news editor, Mr. William Beckman.
Hello. Looking forward to rounding out the season in style, just like Inter did on Sunday. And to mark the occasion, I'm actually wearing that very Inter shirt they were wearing yesterday because I treated myself to ordering it a few weeks ago. And I have to say, it's grown on me, even though these got some strange diagonal lines. I'm dressed for the occasion. I used to just come on with an Inter mug. You may remember a few years ago. I've gone up in the world since then. So looking forward to hopefully having this enhance my performance somehow.
Very nice. Did you get a player for it or just the team shirt?
I didn't for this one. I got Barella for the third kit, which was purchased a few months ago. So I thought one was enough because, I mean, they could all leave basically. So I was taking a risk at this point.
It's a celebration, William. This is a celebration. We don't talk about those things.
Yeah, we will get to that as well. Mr. Mike Piellucci.
Howdy.
How's things?
Things are good. We're league champions. It would have been better if Juventus missed the Champions League, but we can't get everything, right?
No, we can't. Gattuso did what he did at Milan a couple of years ago. Finished fifth, a point off fourth. That time it was Inter, this time it's Juve. Maybe that's his thing, to finish fifth, 1 point off. Who knows? Anyway, we have a very special guest today. He's a good friend of the show. He's been on many times. He was last with us just before Christmas break, if I'm not mistaken. He's a Serie A commentator for the World Feed, among other things. Welcome, Mr. Kendrick.
Thank you very much, gents. It's delightful to be here. It's funny, Will was mentioning about his Inter-based apparel. I sleep in the awful free T-shirt I got with. Do you remember Inter Social Nights when they did all of the dreadful sort of mock-up cartoon faces of everyone? I mean, it does mean that I sleep with Lucio Spalletti on my chest, which is nice, but it's on rotation. Don't worry. I don't want this to start rumours that I'm somehow a closet Inter fan. It's on rotation with a bright green Savannah Bananas minor league baseball T-shirt. So it's all glam here. Yeah, but there you go. I mean,
The
I don't
glamorous
think
lifestyle. of
unfortunately,
Patrick Kendrick.
Savannah Bananas doesn't really rhyme in British English, does it? So I think you need to say Savannah Bananas, and it works
Yeah,
a
I
bit
think
better.
you have
But
to say that.
there you go. That's the scoop.
Very good yank.
To
Very
begin
good yank right
the,
there, Patrick.
To begin, thank you very much. Good scoop to start the podcast, I thought. So
Absolutely. Now we know.
I'm sure Daniele Mari will probably be tweeting that as we speak.
Exactly. Patrick Kendrick reveals what he wears pajamas at night. I mean, did they never made anything for that horrible Interbells thing, did they? That was just an affront to the ears and the video, the eyes.
Please stop calling that horrible. It was the best thing ever.
It was
That
horrible.
Interbells thing is the greatest thing ever made out of Intermedia House. How's that horrible?
It's absolutely horrible.
Along with the hit series Euro Express, I mean, that was critically acclaimed as well.
Yeah, well, the one that you did, yeah, I remember.
Oh yeah, forgot I was hosting that.
Yeah, right. No, that was great. I remember that. It was it was you and was it you and Astrid? No.
No. Unfortunately, Astrid was Champions League level, and then when Inter dropped out of Europe's Premier Club competition, then there was no budget for Astrid, so they made do with internal resources. And, I was Mr. Europa League, so there you go.
Mr. Ludogorets.
Exactly, very good.
Mr. Ludogorets.
It was
Brilliant.
season
Right.
4, unfortunately, but there we go.
Right, let's start. Let's get into this. And I wanted to ask you. I mean, if we kind of try to contextualize, 90 plus points for the second time in Inter's history, a machine at home, 17 out of 19 wins. It didn't start that well, but it certainly ended well, and Inter went on this crazy run with Conte, in many ways reminiscent of that season under Trapattoni. If we were to contextualize this in some sort of, not too far back, but in some sort of modern historic context, where would you rank what Inter have done this season and what Antonio Conte has done, Patrick?
I think you have to put it right up there, to be honest, because of where Inter came from. You know, we all know, you know, the often talked about percorso di crescita. You know, Spalletti was constantly talking about how they were going to improve and develop as a team. And it's one thing finishing fourth 2 years in a row. It's another finishing second and then first. But it's not even finishing first, scraping over the line. You know, winning the league with 4 games to spare is almost unheard of, really, especially given I think there are some good teams in this league. And I think Inter probably developed at a faster pace than anyone expected them to. I'm not sure there was necessarily a sign that they were going to dominate domestically to this extent, given what had gone on last season, to be honest, and the start of this campaign. So I think you have to put it right up there, because it's not easy. There was a lot of skepticism surrounding Conte because of those inevitable, the ties to Juventus as a player, as a captain, as a coach. And so you have to be convinced of your ability. You have to be bullish in the way he is, and you also have to be a very good tactician. I think he showed all of that. So I think you have to rank it right up there. You know, this is not, and I'm a big fan of Roberto Mancini. I think he's doing a very good job with the national team. But lest we forget, you know, that run of 4 titles, you know, that was then 5, I suppose, with the Calciopoli one awarded to Inter. You know, that was when the first season Juventus were in Serie B, and you know, and the league suffered a little bit of that. Whereas now you had Juventus on the back of 9 straight league titles, albeit yes, they did hire a rookie coach, for want of a better word, but you had a very good Napoli squad. I mean, look at that squad. I don't think it's any worse than Inter's, perhaps on the basis that Inter have the best defence by some distance in terms of the personnel. I think that's the big difference between those two. But certainly in terms of attacking potential, I don't see any difference between Inter and Napoli, really. And so the short answer is it's an incredible achievement, and I think you have to rank it right up there.
For sure. I'll hand you over to Mo. Mo, did you have a question for Patrick?
Yeah, hi Pat. So assuming that Inter don't go through a nuclear meltdown over the summer, you know, and things largely stay in as they are, with a bit of reinforcements, maybe selling a decent player or two with correct replacements coming in. What do you think this current team ceiling is from a European perspective? Seeing the current landscape in Europe, the Spanish giants aren't doing too well. Maybe a bit of teetering at Bayern. Do you think that the Inter can be in this cycle in the coming year or two play an important role on a continental level, or do you think that the percorso della crescita in Europe is still a bit long?
It's a very good question, and I think they can do it, but I think psychologically it's going to be a big hurdle. You almost need to forget what's gone before. I mean, it's 3 straight group stage exits now, isn't it, in the Champions League? And whilst you could, make a case that the first 2 years it was very challenging because they're in the group with Barcelona, the group this year really wasn't that challenging, was it? I mean, who was it? Shakhtar Donetsk and was it Shakhtar Donetsk? Mönchengladbach and Real Madrid. Correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, gents. It's been a long season, as Nima said. So I think in terms of the ability in the squad and the leadership they now have, and the fact that this team has won a significant piece of silverware, I think that's going to help them massively in terms of self-belief. But I just wonder whether those European exits have left some scars, and they do have a few doubts. But as you said, at this moment in time, I don't look around Europe and think that team really frightens me. I do with Manchester City, but if you look at who they're playing in the Champions League final, I'm not sure many people would have expected Chelsea to have got there. I think Manchester United are getting better, but I don't think they're there yet. Will Liverpool come again? Depends if Van Dijk can get back to full fitness. And question marks over Barcelona, mismanaged, an aging Messi. They're now signing Aguero. Real Madrid have got a lot of promising young players, but they're not there yet. And even if you just look, I mean, it's indicative, isn't it, really, of the teams that have won their domestic leagues this year. It shows that Paris Saint-Germain have not been up to scratch really either. So you are faced with that bizarre situation, I'm sure you guys have discussed it in previous episodes, of having pot one, which used to be full of massive clubs, absolute giants. It was always Paris Saint-Germain, Bayern, one of Real or Barcelona, if not both, because, Real went and won all those Champions Leagues in a row. And then it was always Juventus as Italy's representative, whereas now you're going to have Inter and Lille and Sporting and Atletico Madrid. So I do fear Inter will get another tricky group stage draw, but they have to at least finish in the top 2. And then anything can happen. I mean, we saw that with Porto knocking out Juventus this year, and you can get all sorts of surprise results. And over the course of a 2-legged tie, I would be quite confident that Conte could outwit some of his colleagues tactically. So I think it's going to really come down to whether those European exits have left scars, and Inter almost need to win their first 2 or 3 group games, and so then it's just done. Whereas I think if they go in to the last group game needing to get something, then you could almost see them losing the plot a little bit, unfortunately.
Will, I'll hand you over to Will to see what Mr. Beckman wanted to ask you.
Thank you. Oh, what an introduction. Thank you for joining us, Patrick. I'm just looking at the league table, the final league table as we're recording, and I'm trying to think back to those the griglia di partenza that we always get in the start of the season. I'm wondering about teams who've maybe done better or worse than expected, and because obviously Inter have won the league and that's fantastic, but then you get those naysayers who are saying, yeah, but they spent a lot of money 2 years ago, Conte's on a huge salary and they don't play good football, etc., and so on. So if you take the top 7, so Inter, Milan, Juventus, Atalanta, Napoli and the Rome clubs, out of those 7, who would you say is your biggest overachiever and your biggest underachiever of the season? Because I'm not quite sure on a couple of them. I think we'd all agree that Milan have been a lot better than expected, but then maybe some people would say that Inter have done better than expected. So, what sort of surprised you in terms of how the big 7, I suppose, or the 7 sisters have performed this season?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest overachiever is actually Inter, if I'm perfectly honest, simply because of the points tally. I mean, Nima alluded to it earlier on, 91. I think the previous high, the only other high in the the modern era, the classic Opta stats 3 points for a win era was Mancini 0607. I've looked that up yesterday, 96 or 97 points, 96 I think it might have been. But so that in itself shows just how dominant Inter have been. 3 defeats all season, which might have been 2, but we won't get into that. That's for another day. So I think Inter overachieved in the sense that, yes, on paper, you could make a case for them being title contenders. The second place finish last season was a little bit misleading, lest we forget, everyone looks at the table. Oh, they only finished a point behind Juventus, but I think Juventus lost 3 of their last 4 or something like that, or maybe even the last 3 after they won the title against Sampdoria. Inter finished strongly because, they also had that Europa League campaign coming up. So, I think they also had one eye on that. They were sort of building towards a crescendo with that. So I think Inter, the biggest overachievers, followed shortly behind them by Milan, who I kept expecting them to fall away. They did eventually fall away. But at one stage, I remember Nima with a lot of angst in his voice. He was slightly torn, because on the one hand I could hear him brimming with national pride at the fact that Ibrahimovic was inspiring Milan, and on the other I knew that it was killing him inside, because he was like, oh, the one time Juventus aren't going to win the league and it's going to be bloody Milan rather than Inter. So I think Milan had a brilliant season, and I saw a lot of justice in that result yesterday, because they were the main title challenger along with Inter for so much of the season. And I thought that, I think it is a snapshot of what we saw most of the season, with Inter eventually just staying the course. So I think both Milan clubs overachieved, and it's great to see them back at the top of the table. I think Juventus would have been my biggest underachievers had they not salvaged the Coppa Italia. And it's weird being in Italy, because you guys know as well as I do that for some reason they set a little bit of stall by the Super Cup, which is just bizarre. It's that basically, did you win the league or win the cup the previous year? No, sorry. Did you win the league the previous year, or did you get to the final of the cup and hope that the team that won the league, like Juventus did 4 years in a row with Allegri, won a league and cup double? So you have bizarre teams like Lazio and Milan playing in the Super Cup against Juve, and I'm not a big fan of that. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent here. All that is to say, there are only 3 pieces of domestic silverware, and Juventus still won 2, even with all of their well-documented problems. So they're somewhere in the middle. They underachieved, but not to a great extent. Roma, for me, I think they were about on par when I look at that squad. I mean, it's a dreadfully run club, if I'm perfectly honest. They have some ridiculously high earners. The squad is appalling. There's about 3 or 4 very good players, and I think that's about it. And the rest of them, I think Mkhitaryan's been very good, but unfortunately, I think that shows that Serie A is still quite a way behind the Premier League if he can come in and get the sort of numbers he did, albeit he was, an important player in that team, whereas maybe he was overlooked and was part of a rotation elsewhere, and maybe their style of play suited him. But, Fonseca was undermined from start to finish. The fan base are notoriously irritable. Edin Dzeko has been agitating for a move for 3 or 4 transfer windows in a row. They never resolved their goalkeeper issue. They got Mirante in for a dozen games at one stage. A whole host of issues, and it's quite telling, I think, when Brian Cristante is one of the best players in your team, and that's not me doing a disservice to him. I actually think he's better than he gets credit for, but I honestly think they've got Pellegrini, Spinazzola, and maybe 1 or 2 others that that would probably make the starting lineup of other teams, and even then, would they? So for me, I think expectations are always higher in Rome about Roma than they should be, and they have been for 20 years, really. Or there was that good side, I guess, that kept contesting the Coppa Italia final. It was a good team under Spalletti, so that's not quite fair. But I do always think their expectations are higher than they should be. Not surprised to see Lazio running out of steam as well, because they were never really going to manage to sustain that European campaign. But because they got through to the knockout stages of the Champions League, I would again say par for the course for them. So who am I leaving out? I'm going to get to Napoli last, I think. Atalanta, slight overachievement, I think. But they've set such high standards, to be honest. I like Atalanta. I'm not, I've only got one foot on the sort of on the hype train. That's a terrible analogy, isn't it? I don't, I've got my head out the window on the hype train, and I could, sort of that. I think they're good. I think they're overachieved. I think they're well run, but I think they might have reached their ceiling. So I find myself agreeing with Fabio Caressa, who said that last night, and Gasperini wasn't particularly pleased with the question. Not that he normally is. So which leaves us with Napoli, the biggest underachievers by some distance. I mean, that squad is frighteningly good, to be honest. I think Gattuso made a mistake by not backing Meret and just making him first choice from day one. I think that undermined his confidence. I mean, Meret is a 97. He's only 24. I mean, it's still very young for a goalkeeper. And I think he should be the one to really challenge Donnarumma. I would have preferred to have played Rahmani rather than Manolas. I think he's a better defender than Manolas, who's really gone off a cliff. But when you've got a team that has Fabian Ruiz, Koulibaly, Insigne, or Osimhen, I mean, obviously he missed large swathes of the season. You've got the luxury of bringing on Mertens as either a number 10 to replace Zielinski or as a striker to replace Osimhen. You've got Politano having the best season of his career. You're finally seeing the best of Lozano. I watched Napoli at times this season just tearing teams apart, and I thought, this is bizarre how they don't do this week in, week out. So they are by far and away the biggest underachievers. And it was just so Napoli. It's just, it's a sort of microcosm of that city and how they're just all or nothing, and the people. And I am qualified to talk about that because it was just so Napoli, yesterday on paper, a Verona side that had won 1 in 12 games, that had just looked, Verona very quickly realised they were never going to be caught in 10th. They were, I guess they should have really been 9th behind Sassuolo. I mean, Sampdoria finished above them, but they were never going to be really caught. They were never going to catch the top 7 and make Europe. And so to go out like that and draw with such a whimper against that Verona side. But it's a credit to Juric. They play in such an awkward, obstinate way. They play good football as well. But Napoli just had no answer for them at all. So I think, to recap, sorry, I know I'm being very long-winded here. Inter and Milan overachievers. Inter, the biggest overachievers. Napoli, the biggest underachievers. Juventus underachieved. Atalanta, marginal overachievement. And then I think par for the course, really, for the two Rome clubs, who I think are a pretty low ebb at this stage.
I actually pretty much agree with that assessment. Mike, did you have a question for Patrick?
First off, excellent call yesterday, Patrick. Really enjoyed listening.
Thank you so much.
I think all of us here sort of, Mo said it off the top. I think all of us here have an idea of how we realistically want this summer to go for Inter, which amounts to no major departures, keep the band together, maybe rejuvenate some of the backups. What do you actually think is going to happen? Because things are certainly murky. The financial situation is not great. What do you think this Inter team looks like when next season begins?
It's very hard to know because I'm not really privy to the balance sheet, and none of us are. But I think this has really hit clubs hard, and especially a team like Inter that had 65,000 in every single week. That massive average attendance. And so you do miss out on so much revenue, and it wasn't just one season, it was a season and a half. And so naturally you have to balance the books, and there has been a slight relaxation, I know, of financial fair play, and I think it's been completely discontinued, isn't it? I'm not sure when that actually goes into force. But it's also true that at the peak of your powers, when you do reach the summit, as Inter have done now, that is when your players reach their highest market value, particularly when they've got players of a certain age that have a massive potential sell-on. So Bastoni's a 99. Sorry, I keep talking like an Italian, but it's just my way of accurately remembering players' ages, as opposed to me once saying to a colleague at Inter, "Oh, Modric must be about 27." He was like, "No, he's 34." So ever since then, I've endeavoured to learn years of age. But I mean, Bastoni on that basis at 22. I mean, if you were to sell him to an English club now, even post-pandemic, I think you could get 60, 70 million euros for him. And I remember that Inter parted with a big fee at the time for him, and then obviously managed his progress very well. Skriniar similarly, might be time to sell him. He's a 95. De Vrij 92. I think one of the back three will go. I don't know which one. I know that a lot of the fee or the wages for De Vrij has been sort of amortized, and Skriniar's obviously been there now 4 seasons. I think this was his 4th season. Yeah. So Bastoni would be the one with the biggest potential market value.
Bastoni's also the one who would actually stay long term, though. I've thought for a few weeks now that if they have to make a move, I think
he might actually become the best of the three as well. Personally, I think he's brilliant. I really do. I think the only thing that occasionally holds him back is a little bit of complacency. Occasionally seems to go to sleep, but I mean, he's got everything that he needs to be. I mean, if you look, Italy have been, I know it's been quite a sharp decline for some of them, but if you were to say 12 months ago, left-footed centre-backs for Italy, I mean, you'd have named Romagnoli, Chiellini, Acerbi. I mean, there's a lot of them, and yet Bastoni, I think, has to start now for the national team. Based on what we've seen, based on how Chiellini played against Inter, he just looked completely off the pace recently. So I think maybe one of the 3 centre backs. I think 1, maybe 2 players are sacrificed. I don't think you can break up that front pairing. I think Lautaro looked like he was leaving. Now he's stayed. I think he will stay for at least a year or 2, especially because where does he go now? The whole Barcelona thing's gone cold. Right. I think it's best suited to Spanish football. I think Inter are well aware that if they were to sacrifice Lukaku, then Conte would probably walk. And you make a very good point about Bastoni because he's Italian. I think that makes him less likely to be sold. So the same goes for Barella. So where do you go? Brozovic, but you're selling him 2 or 3 years beyond what it might have been the peak of his. It's a very difficult one.
I think it's De Vrij. If there's somebody you're selling, given how much of that fee is amortized, given his age, it's the move that makes the most sense. As much as it would break my heart, because I think in the here and now, he is the best of the 3. They're all so good. You could debate it week in, week out, but that to me, if you're thinking about the eldest, and you assume that an Italian player like Bastoni could stay a long time. Milan Skriniar fired his agent to negotiate an extension at the club. He doesn't necessarily want to leave. I hate to say it, but that's the move that makes the most sense.
I think you're absolutely right, to be honest, and I think he is the best of the 3, to be honest, and he's also the central one of the 3. And I think he makes players around him look so much better. I think that's probably the best signing that Inter have made in the last 3 or 4 seasons. So I think one big player will be sacrificed. I don't know who it would be, and I don't know for how much for, and I don't know whether that keeps the wolf from the door. I guess much depends on how quickly we can get the vaccination campaign out, what knock-on effect that has with, there's a whole logistical side to it that is so dependent on stadium revenue. And I think that the TV deal is worth less than it was, possibly. I'm not sure. Again, so Inter they just need to keep winning trophies, basically. So win a European trophy, even if it's the Europa League and you're in the European Super Cup. Go through to the knockout rounds of the Champions League, get more of that market share, get more prize money. If you're going to go through, make sure you win all of your Champions League group stage matches, because it's the difference at times, I think, between 1.5 million and something like 400,000 or 500,000. I mean, it's quite significant. But I think they are going to have to sell a player. And I think if you can have some viable, cheaper options you're able to bring in, or some promising young players from the academy, then you can probably just about placate the fan base, who are going to be in good spirits anyway, because you finally won the league title after 11 years. I know big things have been said about Pirola and players like that, but the issue is that you haven't had any of these players bedded in or blooded at all during the season. So, I think Conte was so focused on winning the title that there was just never any suggestion. And it is difficult at the big clubs to really bring through some players like that. And who knows how far off they are from getting there. But how much can you make for Pinamonti at this stage? 10 million euros? I'm not even sure, to be honest. So, Mike, I hope I've answered your question. I think most of the squad will stay together because of the power that Conte wields, and because he already made it clear this time last year, well, it wasn't this time last year, it was the end of the season, but it was August, that, if he's not given a team that he feels can compete, he is not going to be, it's all about, to bring back Mourinho, it's all about the eggs and the omelettes and all that sort of stuff. So if he doesn't feel he's got the proper resources with which to do his job, then his stock is very high as well. He could go almost wherever he wants now, and he might want another crack at England. Who knows? So I think one will go, but I don't see it being the front two. And if we're completely honest, Eriksen is still sort of rehabilitating his reputation after that difficult start. Brozovic could be the one. I think they're talking about Paris Saint-Germain. That could be quite a good move. But they're not going to sell Bastoni. I don't think they're not going to sell Barella. You need that Italian core, those bright young things for the national team. So yeah, I think maybe one of those three central defenders, because I think it'd be very hard to find someone as good as Hakimi that could have such an impact as he has. So I think you have to hang on to him at all costs. Perisic, I think, is an 89. So 32. What can you get for him? Maybe maybe he can go back to German football. Maybe if you can make 10 million euros with Pinamonti and 10 million with Perisic, then maybe you start to offset the cost of one player. You only have to sell one rather than two, because I think if Inter sold two, then that brings them right back down to the level of some of their competitors as well.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that this fan base is not going to stand for it. They want a ciclo, and Conte would walk away as well. I think it's one of those things where everyone understands that there needs to be a bit of cost cutting, and there needs to be a mercato autofinanzato and all that. But at the same time, if they start, going into the Barellas and the Bastonis and the Skriniars and the Lukakus and all that, the patience, then they're really underestimating the patience of this fan base, because it is not. They may be happy right now, but if they see a dismantling of this side, they will revolt. And that's just how I read the tea leaves among this fan base, especially in Italy. They want a proper cycle. They've waited 11 years for a cycle, and they're not going to stand for anything else. Now, everybody understands they're not going to buy big name players, and there's not going to be much investment. But there's a difference between that and keeping the squad together for another year, which I think it's good enough to mount another Scudetto challenge and go through the Champions League group stage to a quarterfinal. That's the level they're at. I think that's acceptable. Anything under than that, depending on who it is, would cause a lot of pissed off fans, to be honest. I don't think the patience is that high with that, to be honest. But we'll have to wait and see. I still think that this whole thing has been incredibly exaggerated and poorly reported, and not because, let me rephrase that, not poorly reported, but mainly because Suning's strategy since day one has been to lead from behind in terms of how they want the narrative to go. They don't say anything until somebody like Zazzaroni does something incredibly stupid, and they get Real Madrid to come out and deny that what he said was true. Or with the mayor of Milan, for example, when he steps over the line, then they have to go in and boom, smack it. And I, you can think what you want about, but it's about that. But that is their consistent strategy. That is how they've been doing things from day one since they took over this club. They're not very proactive. They're reactive. They don't really care what's said unless someone crosses the line. And that's why I think a lot of this stuff has happened. And I think for Antonio Conte, this was new, because at Juve own their narrative in the media. They absolutely do. and this is not how it works at Inter. And so they've kind of created a group, and everyone's come together, and it's us against the world, which is very typical of Inter's DNA and history. So I don't know. I still think that this meeting that they're going to have is not going to be as dramatic as the one Villa Bellini last season, or in August. I think it's going to be much more calmer than that. It's going to be a lot of clarifications. For example, I think, given that what we know is true, they've got to cut costs by 15-20%. Well, then you tell Antonio Conte, look, you have 1 year left on your contract, 13.5 million net. Well, if we extend that by a year, but we cut your salary by 20%, you make 10 million net per year, but you make it each year over 2 years. That makes then he makes more money. And I think a lot of contracts are going to be renegotiated that way. The players grow, like, over a longer period of time, make more money than the contract is worth, but that over the annuum, the year, they'll cut wages down by about 20%. I think that's the strategy they're going to go with. Although, you have to remember that you've got Bastoni and all these other players who've already negotiated their contract, and they're not going to accept a wage lower, than what they're making. So I think this is what they're going to do. And whether or not they sell someone, hey, Suning have made that very clear back in 2 years ago when Man United wanted Perisic. Either you pay what Suning want for their players, or the player stays. They don't mess around with things like that. And I think when you have an investor like Oaktree, who have just come in, I don't think they're too keen on seeing, making an investment of 300 million euros and then seeing that value of that asset being slashed by the assets being sold off. I think that's something that they would really not like either. So, but it's not, that doesn't, that's the media. The how the media works, and especially when no one's talking, then someone will talk. You leave a vacuum out, but you got to respect it. This is how Suning operate. Right, Patrick, it was a pleasure to have you on. What's happening next for you? I mean, the TV rights have been extended, if I'm not mistaken. And are you in your company still doing it, aren't they? Or am I wrong here?
Who knows, Nima? Who knows? How long is a piece of string? We don't know. I expect we'll know something in August. There's quiet optimism, but yeah, I mean, in my mind, I'd love to have another 3 seasons commentating on Eldor Shomorodov. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we'll be back next season. But no, it's great to come on. It's always nice to talk Inter, and it's quite nice to actually be able to talk on this podcast. Having seen Inter win a trophy again. I mean, it was quite. I spoke to a lot of friends, obviously, who work at the club yesterday and support the club, and they just said it was very emotional. Really, there were a lot of them were in tears and things, and some of those are club employees. So I think brilliant, absolutely brilliant to see this sort of denouement to the season, and the way it culminated was. I did worry it was going to be a bit of a damp squib in the end, because it was sealed so comfortably, and it's never nice winning it because someone else fails to win when you're not playing. But the fact that Inter had 3 out of 4 matches at home still to play, I think was probably quite nice for the players. And yesterday was a great occasion. I mean, it's one of those, isn't it? It's I'd probably compare it to the amount of Neapolitans that claim they were at the World Cup semi-final in 1990, Argentina, Italy, how they cheered on Argentina, or the amount of Neapolitans that were season ticket holders, when they won the league titles with Maradona. It's going to be one of those. There are 1,000 fans in yesterday at the Meatta, but I reckon if you were to talk to people in Milan over the next 20 years or so, you'd probably cumulatively find thousands and thousands that claim to have been there. But no, great to be on, gents, and yeah, good luck with next season. We'll see how Inter present themselves, for want of a better word, to use an Italianism. See how they line up at the start of next season, and hopefully I'll be one of the voices calling it, because I love this.
I hope so as well, mainly because we're getting so many Portuguese coaches, which I think means more Portuguese players, which means more Portuguese names being pronounced by you.
Well, fingers crossed. As long as Bruno Alves is able to stay in the league again, I could almost
Miguel Veloso.
Yeah, there's loads of them, to be fair. But and He's gone down with Crotone, but I'm sure we'll see Pedro Pereira back as well at some stage. So on that note, gents, have a great evening. And time reference on a podcast, never do that. Should know better. All right, I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Take care. And if you want to follow Patrick on Twitter, it's at Patrick Kendrick with a C, I think. Let me just double check that. Yes, it's Patrick Kendrick. Patrick with a C and then Kendrick. Follow that. Right. Let's move on to do a bit of season review, as everyone does, and we are no exception to that at this point of the season. I thought we briefly just go through. We have a couple of categories. I thought we'd go through them and then just quickly say which one we want to, and then we can discuss it a little bit. Let's start with the flop of the season, the worst player of the season, if you will. And for me, I can't choose between Arturo Vidal and Alexander Kolarov, but if I'm perfectly honest, it's got to be Alexander Kolarov, right? I mean, that's it for me. I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
I would go Vidal. I mean, they're the only two candidates. I would go Vidal just because I think we knew Kolarov would be a backup, and Vidal was supposedly this linchpin to Conte's midfield and his general who would help lead us to glory because of his experience and blah, blah, blah. I don't think anybody actually thought Kolarov would be good. I think at least most people, myself included, had some hope that Vidal could do something. So that one for me.
Will, who's your flop of the season?
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think I don't remember anyone being particularly excited that Kolarov was signing. Vidal, I didn't have huge hopes for either, but you kind of trusted Conte that he would be able to get some kind of tune out of Vidal, but he hardly ever delivered when he did perform. He missed a load of chances, and then he hasn't even played for the last 2 months. So he hasn't even been that person that provides experience, which was supposedly the one thing that he was going to be doing when he came in. So I think it's a bit of a slam dunk for Vidal, but I mean, it all depends on your expectations. And as I said, my expectations were not hugely sky high. So I'm wondering if there's someone else that I can nominate. Just looking down the squad, I this is not me saying I think he's a bad player, but we've hardly seen Sensi again this season, and I would have expected a lot more out of him than I would have done with Vidal. But yeah, I mean, Vidal's wages and the fanfare that he came with, I think he can just sneak it.
Mo, what about you? Are you Handanovic, Sensi, Vidal, or Kolarov, or anyone else?
For me, it's definitely Sensi. I like, with the exception of like the Real Madrid Champions League fiasco, I think Vidal's problem was that he underperformed like expectations of and his last presence in Italy with the Juve, and he's definitely not the same player. So maybe there was this comparison of what he would be able to provide and what he did really provide. But I think in absolute terms, he wasn't that awful. The Real Madrid game aside, Kolarov was Kolarov, easy target from the very beginning. It's very, very difficult to think that he was going to be anything but a flop. But for me, Sensi was a huge disappointment, and to come off yesterday again injured, it's just so depressing for the guy, for us as fans, for like it's so sad. So for me, Sensi, and I don't know because they're all muscular problems. So I don't know if it's really a physical thing or maybe a psychological thing. I think we might have spoken about this earlier, but I think it's unfortunately we've seen maybe a quarter of a season of amazing stuff from the little man, but I think it's best that everyone goes their separate ways now.
Yeah, I think the Sensi thing, it's getting ridiculous. I mean, he's taken the piss. I mean, the injury situation is taking the piss, and you look at this season, a season when Inter have not had that many injuries because they've been so well managed, and Sensi just gets injured every time he walks on a pitch, and it's just not working. So yeah, I'm afraid I agree with you there. Right, Mo, I'm going to stay with you. Who's your MVP?
Yeah, this one for me is a bit more difficult to really. I have three guys. I mean, for sure, Big Rom is the clear, the most obvious candidate. Barella, sure, he hasn't been as effective as Lukaku, but he really has taken control of the midfield, completely changed the narrative of or like the story arc of the Inter midfield. We went from basically relying on a Vecino and a Gagliardini with a Brozovic, temperamental Brozovic, to probably the most reliable, functional, consistent midfield in Italy. So Barella really deserves a lot of praise on an MVP level. And then finally, Bastoni for me is, the guy's 21, 22, and he's become one of the world's best, the continent's best defenders. So much contribution in the back, so much contribution in distribution from the back. So it has to be, to me, one of these three. But I think Lukaku really is symbolic for this season. I think the goals that he scored have not only been really pretty at times, but very important. So I got to go with Big Rom after some mental gymnastics.
What about you, Will? Who's your MVP of the season?
I think it has to be Lukaku. I mean, he as Mo said, there are a lot of protagonists in this season. De Vrij has been incredible in the second half of the season. Eriksen has been great, one of the best players since sort of the end of January. Barella's hardly ever stopped. There are lots of candidates, but this Scudetto doesn't happen without Lukaku.
It's really that simple, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, you got to look at it. This doesn't happen without him because he's so integral to how Inter play in defense, in build-up, in attack, in everything. He's just the most important player in this team right now.
This Scudetto was born when Juventus came in for Lukaku 2 summers ago, but Dybala rejected a swap move to United, and Inter got it over the line. That was an amazing sliding doors moment in the history of Serie A, because otherwise, firstly, Juventus don't have Dybala last season, who was probably their player of the season with them winning the league. But, everything changes. Conte's project is undermined from the start. He has to build the team in a completely different way. Maybe we panic and go and give Roma the money they want for Dzeko. That affects Roma. There's so many different avenues that could have been opened up if Lukaku hadn't joined. I think it's, he scored 24 goals, which, it's not like the most that anyone's ever scored in Serie A. Higuain got 30 something the other year, but it's the importance of the goals, especially in the big games, which has always been a criticism of Lukaku when he was in England, which I think he's disproven. He's got an incredible record in the derby. He scored against Lazio. He's been putting in big performances. When he's not scoring, he's providing assists. When he's not providing assists, he's just generally giving the team a hand when things are going wrong. He's the man that they look to when things are going wrong. You can give the ball to Lukaku and sort of reset, and things can restart again. He's got an incredible relationship with Conte. Everyone at the club has been talking about how sort of important he is behind the scenes. He had that very funny, in hindsight, spat with Ibrahimovic, which he then turned to his advantage when he scored in the derby. I think it's really, really impossible to give it to anyone other than him. And you see him sort of celebrating in Milan as well with the fans a couple of weeks ago when he was driving around. This is the man of the people, the king of Milan, as Inter called him in a tweet today. I think it has to be him.
For sure. Mike, is it a clean sweep for Big Rom?
Yeah, it is. I think Will did an excellent job conveying all the reasons. I do want to say quickly, though, that just as he is the clear number one, Barella has to be the clear number two, especially the first half of the season. It's impossible to overstate how essential he was, because first half of the season, you have Eriksen still being played as the number 10 and the system's not working. So they drop him, and that's the rotating cast of Gall's getting a lot of time. Meanwhile, Brozovic isn't at his best really until closer to Christmas. And it isn't just that Barella was so good and really probably peaked around February. I mean, I would say probably late last year, early this year, he was playing like the best player in the league. But it was that he did it at so many different positions. He played as number 10 at times when they were going with that 3-4-1-2. He did the box to box. They played him as a regista a couple times. He was everywhere doing everything. And it's easy to look back now in the second half of the season with a stable midfield of him, Brozovic, and Eriksen, and see him as just the best cog in a really good midfield. But for a while, he was the whole midfield. And I agree it doesn't happen without Lukaku, but him being everywhere and stepping into every role and running his tail off for 90 minutes every single week, absolutely crucial. For me, he's clearly the second guy. And in a different year with a team that didn't have somebody as influential as Rom, he could be the MVP.
For sure. I mean, for me, I agree with that. I think just the third on that list is Skriniar. I think how he's taken on that role and how brilliant he's been, and the way that he's interpreted that role and been able to do this trademark stuff that he used to do in a back four, is just phenomenal. And this guy ain't going anywhere. I hope, for me, he's my guy. He's the next Inter captain to me. For me, there's no doubt about it.
I just love. I mean, I said this with Patrick real quick, but just Mo says Bastoni, you say Skriniar. I think De Vrij is the best of the three. But the fact that you could have this debate about three center backs is unbelievable. But I think you really can. They're all so good in their own way, and they mesh so perfectly. I as much as I say he might make the most sense to sell, I really don't want to see this group broken up because it's beautiful to watch them together.
Yeah, no, for me, I mean, if we're talking Mercato and stuff like that, I think the goal is to keep this team together, at least the starting lineup, at least. Then you see what you do with the Vidals and the Sanchez and the Perisic and all that. But the starting lineup needs to stay, and that includes Christian Eriksen, Bastoni, De Vrij, Skriniar, Lautaro, Hakimi, all of them. So to me, it's you don't touch the starting lineup at all. Right, let's move on to the best goal of the season, and I'm torn between two goals here. One is Hakimi away to Roma with his left foot, which I thought was absolutely gorgeous, and one is Barella against Cagliari. I can't choose between those. What about you, Mike? Which one have you gone for?
Those were up there for me. My answer isn't that, though. My answer is actually Eriksen in the cup against Milan.
Yeah, makes sense.
Some of it, too, for me, I was going not just pure aesthetics, but the impact of the moment. And, I mean, that was the beginning of his rebirth, and his rebirth was what got this club's midfield settled and finally gave us the balance we needed. And once that happened, that's when Inter went to another level. But the emotion of it, him reestablishing himself, that was at the point of the season still when Milan were atop the league. And even though this was a cup fixture, that was a statement of intent that Inter could beat them, and leading to the derby in the league when Inter just smashed them. So for me, all of the emotion, the significance, and the fact that it's been a long time since this club had a really dependable set piece taker, a real weapon. You have to go back probably to Wesley Sneijder. And so having that realized here of, oh yeah, that's why we got Christian Eriksen. Before any of us knew Christian Eriksen would start looking like Christian Eriksen again. For me, all of that rolls into that being my goal of the year.
Mo, what's your goal of the year?
Yeah, my two candidates were both derby related. One was the Eriksen goal for sure. I think Mike, you summed it up perfectly. I also think like the aesthetic, the look, that single shot with the ball with Eriksen, in swing and still in swing from the kick and the ball rising over the wall, that is fantastic. But I think my favorite goal has to be Lukaku when he blew Romagnoli out of the water. It's not the prettiest of goals, but I think it just, again, like Mike was talking, like in terms of symbolism, it symbolized how like Lukaku in all his power, ferocious, fast, amazing, and just it's a derby, man, and it's an amazing goal in the near side of the net. It was a really good goal. So I'll go with the Lukaku in the derby.
Will, what about you? Which one's yours?
Or this is good. I've got a goal that hasn't even been mentioned yet, which is interesting. I picked 6 as sort of contenders. I loved Hakimi's goal against Roma. I think that was but that's because I love Hakimi. So I think in terms of sort of considering everything, beauty, importance, and kind of symbolism, I actually think that my favourite goal of the season was Lautaro's goal in the derby, but the team goal that started from Handanovic, encompassed 10 players, and then ended up with Perisic squaring it to Lautaro in the box, because I think it tells you so many things about the journey that this team went on, playing out from the back, showing confidence in a big game, playing with that kind of authority in a derby, which is absolutely huge for the outcome of the season. The goal coming sort of 10, 15 minutes into the second half when Milan were really pushing and Handanovic had made 3 big saves. So it was the perfect timing in terms of the match as well. You've got Lukaku holding the ball up, which we've just talked about how important that was. Hakimi bursting between 2 Milan defenders down on the right wing, giving us a kind of a thrust on that side that we haven't had since Maicon. You've got Eriksen and Perisic, who were the last two players to touch the ball before Lautaro scores. That's a really good summary of what Conte did in January to resurrect those players. It's kind of I see it as sort of the crowning moment of the team, because we'd just gone top. We needed to win that game to become favourites, really, for the proper favourites for the first time. It involved everyone, which proves that we've just been having this discussion about how it's so hard to pick which player you'd want to sacrifice, and that's because everyone in this starting 11 feels so important. So I like that goal, but I agree that it's not, in terms of, we're just talking sort of pure aesthetics, it's difficult. I thought of Barella scored an amazing goal against Cagliari, the volley from distance, which was great as well. Lukaku's derby goal, obviously, with him sort of saying I'm the king, etc., and so on, after that was great. Eriksen's goal for symbolism. Lautaro scored a goal against Verona, which I really liked as well, sort of a hooked finish on the volley round the corner from a cross, which I thought was nice. But I'm going to go for Lautaro in the derby.
Nice one. And then the final candidate, or the final category that we had, that I put together, was the best performance or best favorite game, your favorite game of the season. And for me, from start to finish, it's the Juve game. I'm just annoyed that we didn't score more goals in that game. But in the Serie A, that game, when Inter win 2-0 and completely mop the floor with Juve from start to finish, was just poetry in motion from start to finish. It was the perfect Antonio Conte game. In my opinion, it's Conte's best. It was Inter's best game under Conte. They were faultless from minute 1 to 10, from minute 1 to 90. What about you, Will? Which one did you have?
Yeah, it's kind of like Lukaku for me. It was just an obvious pick, and I think it's significant that Inter did a lot of interviews for their match day program on Sunday for the game against Udinese, and as part of the program, they asked all of the players to pick a momento Scudetto, like the biggest moment of the season or the biggest game, and 6 or 7 of them picked that match as the moment that things changed. Conte has been on the record before talking about the importance of that game as well. Beating the team that had won the last 9 league titles, was really, really important in terms of mentality and belief. That I also remember that podcast that we did before the Juventus game. We just lost that lead at Roma when Conte had made his substitutions, and we squandered 2 points that we thought at the time were going to be crucial. We didn't trust this team's mentality in these big games. We had a lot of games where we'd gone in front and then been pegged back against big oppositions because we didn't have the nous to see them out. And this was a complete change. It was 2-0, but it could have been 4 or 5-0. Juventus made their mistakes, sure, and they got the better of us in the cup. But it was perfection, really. And as you said, it wasn't just the fact that it was the first win over Juve since De Boer. It was an absolute demolition job. And I wonder if it had been a tight win, I wonder if maybe it wouldn't have had the same impact as this win, because I think it was the fact that we took on the team that had won the league for the last 9 years and made them feel a complete irrelevance on the pitch, really. In terms of Conte, I suppose in terms of dominance, it kind of reminds me of that Italy-Spain game in the Euros. That was also 2-0. That could have been 4 or 5 as well. He just completely annihilated his his opponent. And of course, we had that pass from Bastoni, which is probably assist of the season, which is not a category we've got, but that was pretty incredible as well. So there have been lots of good performances. Obviously the derby is a great performance. I love the win over Lazio 3-1 because that was the day we went top. On Valentine's Day, Eriksen started for the first time. But yeah, I think it has to be the Juventus game, because that was everything we'd been waiting for several years. And also, it came after a week of this came when all these off-pitch rumours were starting. So it sort of came completely out of context in relation to what was going on off the pitch as well, which kind of made it even more impressive.
What about you, Mo? I think it'll be a clean sweep for the Juve game, but am I right, or have you chosen something else?
No, clean sweep for sure. One of the fondest memories of the season, and really summed up well by Will.
Nice one. Mike, what about you?
Not a clean sweep. I'm saying it's the second Milan derby. It's really, I think that's the only other option you could pick, but it was still 1 versus 2. It had a lot on the line. not only, I mean, they win that match, that's when the league is won. And, Mo's goal of the season for me is, one of maybe the moment of the season, with Big Rom sealing that win, smacking his chest. That was an alpha dog performance. That was showing everyone, as stereotypical as it is, that this is the team in Milan. This is the team that is going to win the Scudetto. And on top of that, the icing on the cake was, I don't want to say the last great Samir Handanovic performance, because I hope if he's here next year we get some more. But if there was ever a time to get, I talked last time when I was on, right, about how that man gave everything he had to this team, and when there was nothing to win, and now when there's something to win, his body just can't do it anymore. But if there was ever a time to summon a little bit of old Samir Handanovic magic one more time, it was then, and he pulled it off. And it was just, his highlight of that season. Just that match to me felt so significant. As much as I just love just watching Juventus get humiliated. That's fun in any context. The Milan match is when I felt, okay, the league's over. They're winning. This is happening.
For sure. Right. For the last time this season, it's time for the part of the show where we pay tribute, where the piss out of, criticize someone or something heavily in the world of football, starting with the negativity, which will be presented by Mr. Mike Piellucci, this week's Moggi.
So much to, there's a decent amount to choose from. It's tempting to say Juventus in the Champions League because they were so close. They weaseled their way back in, and I didn't want to see that. I'm tempted to also blame Napoli for this happening with the meltdown
they kind of
that
choked. They kind of choked.
It's not kind of. They absolutely did. And I think Patrick was dead on that team is so good. I think squad-wise, probably the second best team in the league, and they just had a total meltdown. The irony of having that team having a meltdown being managed by one of the most mentally tough players of his day, right? Rino Gattuso wasn't afraid of anything when he played.
No.
And his teams play like they're afraid of things when he manages them. But as much as I want to pick those two teams, the Moggi of the week is just, can we just say the next 2.5 months? It's going to be exhausting. It's going to be tiring. I'm not looking forward to the summer at all. I think even the best case scenario isn't as exciting as you'd want it to be, right? I think for so long, I've always been about big picture with this club, because for me, it isn't about one Scudetto, all right? This isn't some magical dream Napoli run that almost happened a couple years ago. This is Inter. When you win a Scudetto, it's not just to win one. It's to get back to a point where you can win every single year or be in the mix every single year, because that's what this club deserves. That's what our history says. So the idea... I don't want this to be a 2011 Milan where you win and everybody's excited and gets taken apart in that moment. And I don't want it to be a 2010 Inter where you win, but then it's just like slowly letting the air out of the balloon for the next several years. I want this to be the beginning of something. And if there was a time before the pandemic and when Suning was allowed to spend money, when I was certain that this would be. Now I don't think anybody knows. I don't think anybody has any idea what this team is going to look like next season. And whatever it does look like, the road between now and then is just going to be really tiring. So Moggi of the week is just the endless stream of transfer talk that we are going to hear, and endless array of balancing of books, and the endless, can we please sell Valentino Lazaro to somebody, conversations we're going to have, and the endless, why won't Cagliari pay a few million euros for Raja Nainggolan when he's actually good for them? And the endless, please, João Mario, just stay in Portugal. I can't do it for a whole summer, guys. I'm going to do it, but I can't do it. So, since we won't be together on the airways for a couple months, I look forward to being with you again in August. Hopefully things are good. Hopefully we don't have too much to rant about, and hopefully I haven't lost my mind too much before then.
Amen. I think most of that will be taken care of after the meeting between Conte and Zhang. If they find an agreement and Conte continues and stays on, I think that shows where this is headed, if I'm honest. Right, let's move on to something much more comical. This week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. William Beckman.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
Yeah, much less profound, unfortunately, than Mike's very, very well explained Moggi of the week. It's to do with some end of season celebrations that took place yesterday in the Premier League. Obviously, we had our title party yesterday, which was great, very fulfilling and rewarding. great to see Handanovic have that moment of lifting the trophy, as Mike was saying on Twitter on Sunday. But there was a slight mishap in Arsenal's end of season festivities. Obviously, they didn't have anything like as much to celebrate as we did. They finished 8th. They're not even in Europe for the first time in, I think, 25 years. But they did have a nice farewell celebration for David Luiz at the end of the game, and he was being sort of celebrated and lifted up and celebrated. And then the celebrations were broken up because Gabriel, the centre-back, suddenly realised that he had been elbowed in the face and he had lost his tooth. So he had to abandon whatever post-match plans he had, and he had to spend, I don't know how long actually, but the impression I get is quite a while. Certainly a lot longer than 30 seconds, a few minutes at least, sort of very sheepishly crouching, sort of stooping on the pitch and looking for this missing tooth with his teammates, which obviously is exactly what you want to do just after you finish the end of the season. So you've got this strange video that's gone out on social media where Mikel Arteta is stood by the touchline, and they're preparing all the board behind him for the sponsors for his post-match interview. Everyone's getting in possession, and then just in the background you've got Gabriel and one of his teammates sort of crouching around the centre circle looking for a tooth that I don't think he even found. I'm not sure if he ever found it. So, in terms of post-match celebrations, that was a bit of a mishap.
That is such a frog. That is such a frog.
There we go. That's the frog.
Indeed.
And I don't know if he found it. So, but I mean, regardless, it was not how you wanted to end the season.
No, it absolutely isn't. Let's move on to something much more positive. This week's Moratti, which is presented by Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of this qualities.
Yeah, so I'm just to follow on Will's frog. I think the fact that they were celebrating finishing 8th alone is a frog worthy.
Well, they weren't celebrating finishing 8th. It was because David Luiz is leaving after they were celebrating.
I'd celebrate David Luiz leaving after watching his defending. Woo, get him on the first train out of town. Let's go.
I swear to God, if you want to drive me crazy, the very idea of him joining Inter, it's making my piss boil just now. I don't want him anywhere near Inter. I don't care. Keep Ranocchia, keep D'Ambrosio. Do not bring him to Inter. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. I know that Conte's had him at Chelsea. No.
Breathe. Take a deep breath, Nike. Deep breath.
Oof, yeah, sorry.
Anyway, so on to the positivity. I've got so the first thing is we've credited Intermedia House so many times over the past couple of years. They've really been doing an amazing job. But this morning, the video I woke up to with I'm Conte, I'm Antonio. They're really going all out, making sure that they bribe his ego, stroke his ego, and make sure that Conte wants to stay. So I think all these little videos have been great, but this video today was super cool. But in all seriousness, no, I think my Moratti of the week has got to be this Oak Tree 275 plus 31 million
deal,
equity plus loan deal. Yeah. Again, like you said, Nima, announced at the right time. Not much talk before then coming up to it. I mean, sure, there had been discussions in the press, but prior to its conclusion, nothing came out from Suning except
no, they
don't
say anything. They don't say anything.
And honestly, it's I'm pretty sure, again, it shows deft management or good fortune, I don't know, but announced just at the right time prior to the meeting with Conte, allowing everyone to really celebrate without having any sort of overbearing cloud looming over the festivities. So I think that news for me is fantastic, especially when taken in context with what you had said earlier about a new investor coming in, not wanting to see their prized asset being torn apart and sold off. So
devalued.
I think exactly. So I think regardless of what the actual sum is, what the money that goes into the bank is, what it means is that the financial objective of the season has been achieved. Winning the Scudetto has made the Inter brand really sexy and lucrative. We have an investor that's willing to buy out a legacy investor, put in equity, not just loan some money, but put in some equity, resolve short to medium term liquidity issues. Hopefully, then this can be a stepping stone onto which to build that winning cycle that we all crave so dearly, so that the terrible scenarios forecasted by Mike earlier, the 2010 Inter and the 2011 Milan, really are far removed from what our Nerazzurri reality will be for the coming 3 to 5 years.
Amen. I'm not too worried at all. I just want Conte and Zhang to sit down and talk, come to an agreement, and then I'm not really that worried. I don't believe this alarmism. I don't think it's been. I mean, again, a lot of it is, I don't want to blame Suning, but when no one's talking, when you leave that much of a space and you don't own your narrative and you don't control it the way that Juve and Milan do, then you're going to have all these voices. But that's their style. They've been consistent. You can't say anything. They've been consistent since day one, and they don't care. That's the most important thing. These things used to affect Inter. Now they don't even affect Inter at all. It's like they just don't care. The club doesn't care. The players don't care. The technical staff don't care. The directors don't care. Let them talk. That's the attitude they're going with. And, it's frustrating for the fans to listen to this nonsense, but this is their strategy. They're going to do what they're going to do, and everyone can say whatever they want. And it doesn't matter. It's not just Italian media. It's international press as well. From the New York Times to Reuters to Bloomberg to whoever it is. Suning don't care. They just don't say anything. Nothing comes out of them. Nothing comes from them. They don't leak anything. They don't say anything. When they're ready to announce, they announce. And that's why I think that, people need to calm down and see that this is a pattern now. And this is how they work. So I'm just waiting for this meeting tomorrow to be done with, and then we can all move on with our lives. Pretty much.
Yeah, even the announcement of the Oak Tree deal was a note to answer. There was no official statement. It's very, very, very as low profile as you can get. The word Suning didn't feature in that statement as well. Really, this is just how they do things, like it or lump it.
Yeah, exactly. This is how they work. This is completely in line with who they are and how they work, and so you can't say that this was they've always done this. Like, this has always been it. Since day one. When Lion Rock was introduced, it wasn't anywhere near. It was also very this is Lion Rock. This is who they are. Hello, goodbye. Like, they don't do things. They do things this way. This is their style, and you got to respect it, even if you don't agree with it. It's consistent, and that's the most important thing. And apparently the team, the club, the players don't care. The directors aren't bothered by it. The fans are bothered by it. But that's their cazzi voi. It's your problem, I guess, at the end of the day, because Inter under Suning handle things this way. Right, that's all we had time for this week and this season. I'd like to thank every single one of our guests that we've had this season. Too many to mention. We've had something like 30, 40 people on this season. I'd like to thank each and every one of you guys on the panel this year. It's been excellent having you on, and even those who are not here, Fulvio, Mike, Gallo, Eduardo, Dalmonte, Jake, etc., etc. And all of you listeners. So thank you very much. We'll be back next season. Have a wonderful summer. Have a wonderful Euros. If you're watching that. And until next time we talk, or next time we produce a podcast, take care of yourselves. Listen to your authorities. And sempre e solo Forza Inter.